In the darkest hours of war, when the galaxy teetered on the brink of destruction, humanity's greatest weapon was not advanced technology or superior firepower, but the unwavering spirit of those who had fought before. The Kethvar Empire's invasion was unstoppable, the Galactic Defense Alliance overwhelmed. But as hope faded, one last hope emerged, an old, forgotten protocol buried in the archives of Earth's military. Commander Elena Vasquez reached out to the veterans, dismissed as relics of a bygone era, now called upon for one final stand. Earth's warriors, long retired and forgotten, returned to a battlefield that had long since moved past them. In a war dominated by alien technology, it was humanity's timeless determination that would prove to be their greatest weapon. Now, as the galaxy holds its breath, these veterans prepare to rise once more for one final mission. The forgotten veterans, when hope fades, heroes rise. The emergency sirens wailed across the Galactic Defense Alliance headquarters as Commander Elena Vasquez stared at the holographic display with growing horror. Red dots representing Kethvar Empire ships covered nearly half the galaxy map, each one marking another conquered world. In just 3 weeks, humanity's most dangerous enemy had swept through the outer colonies like a cosmic hurricane, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Commander, we're receiving the final transmission from the Altair system, reported Lieutenant Collins, his young face pale with exhaustion. The bridge crew had been working for 72 hours straight, desperately trying to coordinate the crumbling defense lines. The orbital platforms are gone. The civilian evacuation ships, they didn't make it. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 5 billion lives lost in a single day. The Kethvar weren't just conquering worlds. They were systematically eliminating every trace of the species they encountered. Their bioships consumed organic matter to fuel their war machine, turning entire planets into barren rocks. "What's the status of the Third Fleet?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. Admiral Morrison reports 70% casualties. The remaining ships are falling back to the Beta Centauri defense line, but Collins hesitated, then continued with the brutal honesty that had become necessary in these dark times. Intelligence estimates they won't hold for more than 18 hours. The tactical display showed the truth of their situation. The Galactic Defense Alliance had been the most powerful military force in known space, combining the best technology and tactics from dozens of species. Human innovation, Zephyrian energy weapons, Mantari tactical computers, and Corvani shield technology had made them seemingly unstoppable. But the Kethvar Empire had evolved beyond their understanding. Their ships adapt to everything we throw at them, explained Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Alliance's chief xenobiologist. She had been studying Kethvar technology for months, trying to find some weakness they could exploit. It's like they're learning from each battle, becoming immune to our weapons. The bioships that survived yesterday's engagement are already showing resistance to plasma fire. Elena studied the data streams flowing across her console. The Kethvar fleet was massive beyond comprehension. Each of their capital ships was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. But more terrifying was their apparent intelligence. They weren't just overwhelming their enemies with superior firepower, they were outthinking them. "There has to be something," Elena muttered, accessing the Alliance's military database. "Some weapon, some tactic we haven't tried yet." She had been scrolling through classified files for hours when she found it buried in the deepest archives of Earth's military history. A single document marked with the highest security classification, titled Last Stand Protocol, Emergency Activation Only. The file was over 200 years old, created during the early days of human space exploration. The protocol was simple in concept, but shocking in its implications. When facing extinction-level threats, Earth's government could activate retired military personnel for one final mission. Not the recently retired, but the truly old soldiers, veterans who had fought in conflicts that most people had forgotten, men and women who had been dismissed as relics of a more primitive age. Elena read through the psychological profiles attached to the protocol. The researchers had discovered something remarkable about humans who had survived multiple wars. They developed a unique form of tactical thinking that couldn't be replicated by younger soldiers or artificial intelligence. It was the ability to see patterns in chaos, to find solutions when logic suggested none existed. "This is insane," she whispered herself, but kept reading. The protocol had never been activated. It was considered too controversial, too risky. Why would anyone send elderly humans against enemies that had defeated the galaxy's most advanced military forces? The answer lay in the final section of the document. The protocol wasn't about sending old soldiers to die. It was about sending people who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Warriors who had been forgotten by a galaxy that preferred to rely on technology rather than human experience. Elena made her decision. She activated her secure communication system and sent a priority message to Earth. Within minutes, she was connected to the office of General Marcus Stone, the man listed as the protocol's primary contact. The holographic projection showed a weathered face marked by decades of service. General Stone was 82 years old, but his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who had never truly retired from military thinking. He sat in a simple office decorated with medals and photographs from conflicts that had ended before Elena was born. "Commander Vasquez," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect across multiple centuries. "I was wondering when someone would remember we existed." "General Stone, I'm sure you're aware of the current situation. The Kethvar Empire has broken through our main defense lines. We're looking at total galactic conquest within the next month." "I've been following the reports," Stone replied grimly. "Your people are fighting well, but they're fighting the wrong kind of war. The Kethvar aren't just another enemy. They're something new." Elena felt a spark of hope. "You've studied them?" "I've studied everything, Commander. It's what old soldiers do when they're forced into retirement. We watch, we learn, and we prepare for the call that we hope never comes." Stone leaned forward, his expression serious. "The Kethvar Empire operates on principles that your generation doesn't understand. They're not fighting for territory or resources. They're fighting for survival, and that makes them infinitely more dangerous." "Then you'll activate the protocol?" Stone was quiet for a long moment. "Commander, the men and women I'd be calling are in their 70s and 80s. Some are in their 90s. They use walking sticks and take medication for conditions you've never heard of. The galaxy has moved past us. Our weapons are antiques, our tactics are obsolete, and our bodies are failing." Elena felt her hope beginning to fade. "I understand, General. I shouldn't have." "However," Stone interrupted, and she saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes, "we also remember things that the rest of the galaxy has forgotten. We remember what it means to fight when defeat is certain. We remember what it means to sacrifice everything for people who will never know our names." The old general stood up, and Elena could see the careful movement of someone whose body had been pushed beyond its limits many times. "Give me 12 hours, Commander. I'll need to make some calls." "How many volunteers can you realistically expect?" Stone's smile was cold and confident. "All of them. Every single one who can still hold a weapon. We've been waiting for this call for 20 years. The connection ended, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts. She had just committed the Alliance to a strategy that defied every principle of modern warfare. She was sending elderly humans against an enemy that had defeated the galaxy's most advanced military forces. But as she looked at the tactical display showing the Kethvar advance, she realized that conventional warfare had already failed. Maybe what they needed wasn't better technology or superior tactics. Maybe what they needed was something the galaxy had forgotten how to produce. Soldiers who understood that some things were worth dying for. 12 hours later, Elena received a message that would change the course of galactic history. General Stone's face appeared on her screen, but he was no longer in his quiet office. He stood in what looked like a military staging area, surrounded by faces that told stories of decades of service. "Commander Vasquez," he said, his voice carrying a new energy, "the Last Stand protocol is now active. We have 47,000 volunteers ready for deployment. They come from every branch of Earth's military, from every conflict of the past 60 years. They're ready to show the galaxy what old soldiers can do. Elena looked at the faces behind General Stone. They were weathered, scarred, and aged, but their eyes held something that she had seen in very few people: absolute determination. These were humans who had chosen to step forward when stepping back would have been easier. "What do you need from us, General?" "Transportation to the front lines, and then stay out of our way. We're going to teach the Kethvar Empire something they've never learned before." Stone's expression hardened. How to lose? As the old soldiers began preparing for what would likely be their final mission, Elena realized that the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. Not just a last stand, but a demonstration of human resilience that would echo through history. The forgotten veterans were going to war one last time, and they intended to make it count. The wisdom of war experience trumps technology that transport ships arrived at the Beta Centauri defense line like ghosts from humanity's past. Unlike the sleek modern vessels of the Galactic Defense Alliance, these were old military transports that had been pulled from storage facilities across Earth. Their hulls were scarred by decades of service, patched with armor plates from forgotten conflicts, but they moved with the steady purpose of ships that had carried soldiers into battle before. Admiral Kethere of the Zephyrian Fleet watched through the observation ports of his command ship as the first human transport docked. The tall, crystalline being had fought alongside humans for 30 years, but he had never seen anything like this. What emerged from the transports weren't soldiers in any sense that he understood. They were elderly humans, some walking with canes, others moving slowly but with careful precision. "Admiral," his aide whispered, "these are civilians. How can they possibly fight the Kethvar?" General Stone was among the first to board the flagship. At 82, he moved with the measured steps of someone whose body had been pushed beyond its limits countless times, but his bearing commanded immediate respect. Behind him came others who defied every military regulation the galaxy had ever seen. Colonel Maria Santos, 78 years old, had fought in the Titan mining wars when artificial intelligence first tried to replace human workers. Her left arm was mechanical, a souvenir from a battle that had ended before most of the current Alliance officers were born. Sergeant David Kim, 85, had survived the Outer Rim Rebellion where humans had learned to fight in zero gravity, using nothing but determination and improvised weapons. General Stone, Admiral Kethere's voice carried the harmonics of confusion that his species used when confronting impossible situations. I mean, no disrespect, but these are not soldiers. They are elderly humans. Stone's weathered face creased into what might have been a smile. "Admiral, that's exactly what we are. Elderly humans who have fought more wars than you have data files. The difference is we chose to be here." Captain Sarah Chun stepped forward, her 90-year-old frame supported by an exoskeleton that had been built during the Mars Colonial Wars. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded respect across multiple centuries. "Admiral, with respect, your people think of war as a problem to be solved with better technology. We think of it as a conversation between enemies, and we've been having that conversation for a very long time." The briefing room fell silent as the old soldiers took their positions around the tactical display. What followed would revolutionize military thinking across the galaxy. While the Alliance commanders had been analyzing the Kethvar attacks, looking for technological weaknesses, the veterans were seeing something entirely different. "Look at their movement patterns," Stone said, pointing to the holographic display showing the enemy advance. "Perfect coordination, no individual initiative. Every ship moves in harmony with the others. It's beautiful, but it's also predictable." Colonel Santos activated her mechanical arm, interfacing directly with the tactical computer. "In the Titan Wars, we faced the collective. Same principle. Shared consciousness, perfect tactics. We lost every battle until we stopped trying to fight their way." The Alliance officers watched in fascination as the old soldiers began deconstructing the Kethvar strategy. Where the younger commanders saw overwhelming force and superior technology, the veterans saw patterns, habits, and most importantly, limitations. "They're not adapting to our weapons," explained Dr. James Wright, a 74-year-old former military scientist. "They're consuming our technology and incorporating it into their bioships. But they can only process information they understand. Show them something completely illogical, and they have to stop and analyze it." Admiral Ketharay's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "I don't understand. How do you fight with illogical tactics?" The battle continued for hours, but now it was different. The Kethvar fleet, faced with enemies who didn't behave according to any military doctrine they had ever encountered, began making mistakes. Ships collided as they tried to avoid threats that didn't exist. Energy weapons fired at phantoms created by the veterans' psychological warfare. Dr. Wright had turned his medical transport into a mobile confusion generator. He broadcast contradictory signals across all frequencies, created false sensor readings, and transmitted what appeared to be surrender negotiations while simultaneously launching attacks. The Kethvar bioships couldn't process the contradictory information. "Their hive mind is fracturing," reported the Alliance tactical officer in amazement. "Individual ships are breaking formation. Some are actually firing on each other." The old soldiers had accomplished something that the galaxy's most advanced military forces couldn't achieve. They had given the Kethvar Empire something it had never experienced before. Doubt. The bioships that had swept across the galaxy with perfect coordination were now hesitating, second-guessing themselves, trying to understand enemies who refused to fight according to any logical pattern. But the cost was becoming evident. The veterans' ships were taking heavy damage. Many were held together by emergency force fields and the stubborn will of their crews. The old soldiers were paying for their tactical brilliance with their lives. General Stone, report, Admiral Ketharay called over the communication system. Static filled the channel before Stone's voice came through, weaker now, but still carrying absolute determination. "We're holding, Admiral. Estimate 40% casualties among the volunteer forces, but we've got the enemy confused. They don't know how to fight chaos." Through the tactical display, the Alliance officers watched something impossible. The Kethvar fleet was retreating, but not in the coordinated withdrawal they had used in previous battles. They were fleeing in panic, their perfect formation shattered by the sheer impossibility of human warfare. The immediate battle was won, but the war was far from over. The old soldiers had proven that experience could triumph over technology, that wisdom could defeat superior firepower. But they had also revealed something that would change the galaxy forever. The Kethvar Empire could be beaten, but only by those who understood that sometimes the best way to win is to refuse to play by the rules. As the enemy fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Admiral Ketharay realized he had witnessed something unprecedented. A generation of human warriors had chosen to sacrifice themselves not for glory or conquest, but simply to prove that some things were worth fighting for no matter the cost. The galaxy would never be the same. Victory through sacrifice, the greatest generation's final gift. 3 days after the Battle of Beta Centauri, the galaxy held its breath. The impossible had happened. The Kethvar Empire had been forced to retreat, but intelligence reports were painting a terrifying picture of what was coming next. The enemy wasn't just regrouping, they were preparing to unleash something that would make their previous attacks seem like gentle warnings. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in the war room aboard the Alliance flagship, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the enemy's movements. The Kethvar had pulled back to the dark space beyond the galaxy's edge, where their massive bioships were connecting to form something that defied understanding. "It's not a fleet anymore," reported Dr. Tanaka, her voice filled with scientific fascination and horror. "They're combining into a single entity. Our sensors are reading it as one massive organism, roughly the size of Earth's moon." General Stone sat in a wheelchair now, his body finally showing the toll of 3 days of constant battle. But his mind remained sharp as ever, studying the tactical displays with the same intensity he had shown as a young soldier. Around him, the surviving veterans looked like they had been through hell, because they had of the 47,000 volunteers who had answered the call, only 18,000 remained. The others had died doing what they did best, proving that human courage could overcome impossible odds. But their sacrifice had bought something precious: time and knowledge. "They're building a convergence engine," Stone said, quietly, his weathered finger pointing to the anomalous readings on the display. "It's something we theorized about during the Mars Colonial Wars, but never thought we'd see." Admiral Kethare leaned forward, his crystalline form reflecting the light from the tactical displays. "What is a convergence engine?" Colonel Santos, her mechanical arm plugged directly into the data streams, answered with the clinical precision of someone who had studied warfare for 8 decades. "It's a weapon that turns biological matter into pure energy. They're going to target populated worlds and convert entire planetary populations into fuel for their war machine." The silence in the war room was deafening. Every officer present understood the implications. The Kethvar weren't just trying to conquer the galaxy anymore. They were preparing to consume it, turning every living being into energy to power their expansion into other galaxies. "How long do we have?" Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Based on their construction rate, 6 hours, Dr. Tanaka replied. "Maybe 7 if we're lucky." Stone slowly pushed himself up from his wheelchair, his body protesting every movement. But his eyes held the same dangerous glint that had intimidated enemies across multiple wars. "Then we have 6 hours to end this war." The plan that General Stone proposed was so audacious that it bordered on insanity. The remaining veterans would infiltrate the Kethvar convergence engine using small craft, plant explosive charges at key structural points, and detonate the entire facility from the inside. It was a suicide mission with no possibility of escape or rescue. "General," Admiral Kethare protested, "this is asking too much. These soldiers have already given everything." Captain Chun, now 93 and held upright by her exoskeleton, laughed with the bitter humor of someone who had faced death so many times it had become an old friend. "Admiral, we've been dying for the past 3 days. The only question is whether our deaths will mean something." The veterans began preparing for their final mission with the calm efficiency of people who had accepted their fate long ago. They checked weapons that were older than most of the Alliance officers, said quiet goodbyes to comrades they had fought beside for decades, and wrote letters that would never be sent. Elena watched them prepare and felt something break inside her heart. These weren't just soldiers going to die for the galaxy. They were grandparents, teachers, storytellers who had lived full lives and were choosing to end them in service to people they would never meet. "General Stone," she said privately, "is there no other way?" The old soldier looked at her with eyes that had seen too much war and too much death. "Commander, there's always another way. But this is the right way. We're not just fighting to save the galaxy. We're fighting to prove that some things are worth more than survival." The infiltration began under cover of the largest diversionary attack in galactic history. Every remaining Alliance ship fired everything they had at the Kethvar convergence engine, drawing attention away from the small craft carrying the veterans. The enemy's bioships responded exactly as predicted, converging to defend their ultimate weapon. Stone led the first wave, piloting a craft that had been designed for mining operations but modified for war. Behind him came the other veterans, each one carrying enough explosives to level a small city. They flew through a storm of enemy fire that should have destroyed them instantly, but somehow they made it through. The interior of the convergence engine was unlike anything in the known galaxy. Massive organic corridors pulsed with alien life, while technological components hummed with energy that made reality itself seem unstable. The veterans moved through this nightmare landscape with the steady purpose of people who had seen worse things in their dreams. "Teams Alpha through Delta, proceed to your assigned targets," Stone's voice echoed through their communication systems. "Remember, we're not just placing charges, we're sending a message." Sergeant Kim found himself in what appeared to be the engine's central processing core, a vast chamber where bioships were being dissolved and reformed into pure energy. The sight would have driven a younger person mad, but Kim had seen the aftermath of the Outer Rim Rebellion. He knew what evil looked like that as he placed his charges, Kim activated his personal recorder. To whoever finds this, remember that we were here. Remember that humans don't surrender, we don't give up, and we don't let evil win. Not while we draw breath. Colonel Santos was working in the engine's communication center, where the Kethvar hive mind coordinated its activities across the galaxy. Her mechanical arm interfaced with alien technology that her brain couldn't fully comprehend, but her soldiers' instincts told her exactly where to place the explosives. "This is for every world you destroyed," she whispered as she armed the charges. "This is for every species you consumed. This is for the future you tried to steal." Captain Chun had reached the engine's power core, a massive chamber where the energy of a dozen dead worlds swirled in patterns that hurt to look at. As she prepared her final charges, she thought about her great-grandchildren back on Earth, children who would grow up in a galaxy free from the Kethvar threat. But the Kethvar had discovered the infiltration. Bio-ships began converging on the engine, while internal security systems activated. The veterans found themselves fighting running battles through alien corridors using weapons and tactics that were older than some civilizations. All teams report, Stone called over the communication system. The responses came back one by one, each one confirming that the charges were in place. But the casualty reports were devastating. More than half the veterans were dead, and the rest were trapped inside a facility that was about to become the largest explosion in galactic history. "General, Elena's voice came through from the Alliance fleet. Abort the mission. We'll find another way." Stone was in the engine's central control chamber, surrounded by alien technology that defied understanding. But he wasn't looking at the machines. He was looking at a photograph he carried in his pocket, a picture of his daughter and grandchildren taken at his retirement ceremony 20 years ago. "Negative, Commander. The charges are armed and synchronized. In 60 seconds, this war ends." The final minute was the longest in galactic history. The veterans used it to say goodbye, to leave messages for families they would never see again, and to make peace with choices that had defined their lives. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing it was a one-way trip, but they had done it anyway, because some things were more important than personal survival. General Stone activated the detonation sequence with 30 seconds remaining. Around the galaxy, people watched their view screens as the massive Kethvar convergence engine began to glow with the light of a newborn star. The explosion, when it came, was visible from 3 star systems away. The blast didn't just destroy the engine. It sent a shockwave through the bio-ship network that connected the entire Kethvar fleet. Ships across the galaxy began shutting down as their hive mind consciousness was severed. The empire that had threatened to consume everything suddenly found itself blind, deaf, and powerless in the aftermath as rescue ships searched the debris field for survivors. They found something that would become legend. Among the wreckage of the convergence engine, they discovered recording devices that the veterans had left behind. Final messages, tactical reports, and personal letters that told the story of humanity's greatest sacrifice, but more importantly, they found evidence that the veterans had done something extraordinary. In their final moments, they had managed to reprogram parts of the alien technology, sending a signal across the galaxy that would prevent the Kethvar from ever rebuilding their hive mind network. Elena stood in the memorial service 6 months later, surrounded by representatives from every species in the galaxy. The veterans had saved everyone, but their sacrifice had cost humanity an entire generation of its greatest warriors. The memorial was simple, in keeping with human military tradition. A single plaque that read, "To the 47,000 who answered the call. They chose duty over comfort, sacrifice over safety, and the future over the present. The galaxy will remember." But the real memorial was the galaxy itself. Free from the Kethvar threat, species began to rebuild, to explore, to dream of futures that had seemed impossible just months before. Children grew up learning about the old soldiers who had saved them, and the values they had embodied became the foundation for a new age of galactic cooperation. The Last Stand Protocol was retired permanently, not because it had failed, but because it had succeeded too well. Never again would the galaxy forget that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from advanced technology or superior numbers, but from ordinary people choosing to do extraordinary things. The veterans were gone, but their legacy lived on in every peaceful world, every thriving civilization, and every child who grew up free from fear. They had given the galaxy the greatest gift of all, tomorrow, and in the end, that was enough.